there, and welcome back to Gamer Muscle videos. In front of us we have the Thrustmaster TS-PC Racer wheel, which is their latest force feedback wheel. Now those of you familiar with history will know if you look at the Bayer tapestry from 1066 you will find Thrustmaster joysticks and wheels, because Thrustmaster have been making input devices for a very long time indeed. Now in terms of modern history and after the dinosaurs, we've had the T500, the T300, which I've got the base here, which was my previous wheel, and now from the T300 we've gone to this TS-PC Racer. There's also some murmurings that Thrustmaster might also be working on a direct drive wheel, which we don't know anything about, and it's not been 100% confirmed either way. But we're going to get straight to the point with this video, because a lot of people want to know what the TS-PC Racer wheel is indeed like. And we're going to cover the force feedback, the general feel, the build quality, and all the little details that I know you guys that like driving simulators and input devices are looking for from a video. So to begin things off, we'll talk about the price of the TS-PC Racer. The wheel is really quite expensive. It's £500, which is a lot of money. You're getting into lunatic territory with this, and more on the enthusiast side of sim racing. But if you buy before, I think the 22nd of December, you get £40 discount. So you can buy this for £460, which is what I paid for it at this point in time. And if it's anything like other Thrustmaster wheels, I wouldn't be surprised if by mid or towards the end of next year it will be round about the sort of 400 price point, because the prices tend to drop down, especially if you don't buy from the Thrustmaster store but you buy from Amazon or other retailers that sell it at lower prices. So the question is, what do you get for that £500? Now before we look at the force feedback and the actual usability of the device, we're going to take a peek at the build quality and construction of the base and the rim. Starting with the base, compared to the T300, you notice that it's got a lot more metal. On the top there's a sort of metal sheet, on the side there's a metal sheet, and on the bottom it's rather metallic in construction. The back also has a metal plate. Now it's not completely metal in construction, it's a mixture of metal and plastic, and on the front here it's a little bit plastic and a little bit tacky. And also the part that the wheel attaches to is still plastic, with it, I believe, going into some kind of ABS plastic for their somewhat quick release mechanism. The key thing is though, and what you really notice with the wheel, is that Thrustmaster have definitely made a big effort with this rim in improving the cooling over their previous wheels. There's a lot more opportunity for heat to escape, and I think the metal is a big part of that, but also there's vents across the top, vents across the side, vents at the back where the fan is, and the biggest part of the cooling is that they've separated the power supply out into a hairdryer, which is incredibly useful for those of you such as myself that have such luscious long flowing curls and require a large amount of time to dry their hair when they get out of the shower. Now this the separate power supply is shaped like a car turbocharger, and I have to say it does look rather ludicrous. But though it looks, if you look at pictures of it online, it looks pretty terrible. In reality, it's actually not that bad. It's very weighty, weighs probably about 2.5 kilograms. So it feels quite heavy in your hand. But the main thing is it's actually quite nice and small and compact. It has these little holes on it around the edges of it, and it's relatively easy to just put out the way. The only part of the power supply that I'd say could be improved, which obviously won't do because it's now going to mass production, is the cables could do with being a little bit longer. But having said that, the cables are long enough. It's not a problem. You could attach this to the back of your rig or just place it on the floor like I have. And what's nice with that is the power supply is quite hefty, but it's separate from the wheel, so if this warms up, which I haven't noticed it warming up, it's not going to heat up the wheel, and it's probably allowed them to make the wheel, keep the wheel to a similar size to their previous Thrustmaster wheels, whereas if this was in the base itself, the wheel would have to be huge. The power supply, on the power supply, says it's rated to an output of 96 watts. Now, looking on the website, it seems that there's people seem to be a bit confused over the wattage of the motor and the wattage of the power supply. I'm not an expert electrician, so I won't go into too much detail. But all I say, as I say, it says 96 watts max output, and from what I understand, the motor inside is a 40-watt motor. Thrustmaster have got a load of marketing nonsense about this turbo power supply, but it's just a power supply that goes on the floor and has a nice cable that goes to the back of the base. That's all that I really care about, and it does the job. And as I say, it's nice and compact. So though it looks stupid, it's actually not a bad idea. Now, moving on from the base to the rim that comes with the TSPC Racer. It's very apparent that it's using a Formula style rim. Now, the first thing when you hold on to it is it actually feels really nice to hold. The shape of it is really good. Thrustmaster have done a fantastic job in terms of shaping it, at least for my ginormous man hands. Although my hands are, I'd say they're sort of average. They're not Asian small and they're not African big. They're just sort of in between hands. And for me though, it's a really nice fit. What makes this particularly comfortable is that they've gone for what to me looks like proper suede coating on it, rather than Alcantara, which is somewhat surprising because Alcantara I think wears a little bit better than suede. You'll find that suede starts to sort of flatten out and wear down a little bit quicker than Alcantara. But having said that, a nice thing with suede is that I think it's slightly softer to the touch than Alcantara. But either way, actually feels, if you're not wearing gloves, it feels really nice. It'll be interesting to see how it feels after a sort of good 4 or 5 months of usage when it has wear down. You notice that with any wheel which has a fabric coating on it, it will wear down. But it'll be interesting to see what that feels like. But out of the box, feels really nice. In terms of the buttons on the rim, it has the same amount of buttons as the GTE rim and pretty much the same standard button layout that you find on the most of the Thrustmaster wheels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the Manatino switch up and down, and then you can push it in, and then it's got like a directional D-pad on it. Now I would say the Manatino switch is a little bit rubbish. If you compare it to the GTE rim, which we've got here from the T300, the Manatino switch on this is a lot easier to twiddle with your thumb. So say you're driving, you can just nudge it with your thumb and you're good. But with this one on the Formula rim, it's more of it doesn't have an extrusion on it for you to sort of nudge it with your thumb. You'd actually have to twiddle it with your fingers, which I think is a bit annoying and not as convenient. One thing with the buttons that is slightly annoying, aside from the Manatino switch, is that the central buttons are a little bit too central. So you will have to remove your hand from the wheel to push the buttons unless you've got larger hands. I can just about stretch my thumbs to central buttons, but they're not perfectly placed, and so it can be a little bit of a stretch. As I say, more of a problem if you've got smaller hands. A nice thing as well with the rim is that it's got this sort of Thrustmaster brand plate on it, which can be removed with Allen keys, and presumably maybe Thrustmaster will work on their own separate LED displays, but modders I think should find it rather easy to produce something that can fit in there, and the hole's already drilled, so it should be quite easy to put LED displays and do modifications if that's something you're interested in. In terms of the actual thickness of the rim, it's pretty damn thin actually, and surprisingly sharp. Also, in the box when you open this, it says that you have to be over 16 years of age to use this wheel. Anyone younger and you will spontaneously combust, and it's not Thrustmaster's fault because they warned you in the box. But the top of this rim is surprisingly sharp, and if you're driving a Formula car and you get into a little bit of an accident, which sometimes happens, of course it doesn't happen to me because I'm a perfect driver, but you might have an accident and the wheel could fly around, and if you let go of it and you just happen to have your hand here, it could potentially cut your fingers because this is so sharp. I'm genuinely surprised that Thrustmaster didn't either make the faceplate of this Formula rim either a little bit thicker or just bevel the edges a bit. Now, other aspects of this, the rim's construction, it has above and below and to the side of the fabric suede finish, so a sort of rubbery plastic on it that is a little bit soft to the touch, but it sort of just finishes it off and allows you, if you've got slightly bigger hands, to still, to not be on the metal. But where the suede is attached to the rubber, it could be finished off a little bit better. It does look a little bit rough around the edges, and when I first took it out of the box, you could see there were some little bits of glue coming off it that I removed, and it looks all right afterwards. But it doesn't reek of ultra high quality, this rim. It definitely seems like a sort of semi-budget rim. Though it feels fantastic and it's fantastic to use, there's just aspects to it that where I think the quality could be better, or the general build quality could be a little bit better. Now, when it comes to the flappy paddles at the back, the actual actuation of the button is really nice, really good clicky buttons. It's not very likely you're going to miss shift, and in fact, again, if you use the GTE rim as an example, it feels as if it's got an identical mechanism to the GTE rim, and I assume they've just used the same buttons that they're probably using all their rims for the shifters. And the actual shifter paddle size is reasonably large. They're not, I guess they could be higher, they could be smaller, but they're in a good place for the vast majority of people. Be that if you shift with whichever finger you choose to shift, and you can reach them whatever angle you're holding the steering wheel at. So, in terms of functionality, the Thrustmaster rim that comes with the TS-PC Racer is really nice. But yeah, the rim quality is not gonna. You're not gonna look at it and it's gonna blow you away like some of the other rims you might have out there. But as I say, it does the function there. The functionality is there, and I guess that's the main thing. Now, I'm going to remove the rim here to show off the quick release system that Thrustmaster has with this base. Now, it's not really a quick release system, and you'll see I've had to get a spanner out or a screwdriver, because you have to remove a screw to get the quick release out. If you don't do this screw up, then the wheel will gradually work itself loose, and even more so than with the T300, because this has stronger force feedback. It doesn't take much for the rim to work itself loose. So you unscrew the screw, you give this bit here a twiddle, blocking the view with my arm, sorry about that, and then you can pull the rim off, and there you go, wheel removed. So it's the Thrustmaster not quick release system. But yesterday when we were streaming, we did some timing of removing and adding the other rim to the device. I'll just attach the GTE rim so you can see, and we worked out, even with screwing the screw on, it takes about 1 minute 60 seconds to swap over. And what I found was in Assetto Corsa and GTI Evolution, I'm a game behind on that. In Assetto Corsa and Racing Experience, you can hot swap the rims because the buttons are exactly the same. So I guess the game doesn't even know you've swapped the rims over, which is nice. So you can go from a Formula car to a normal car without much effort. So long as you have your little screwdriver in your sim rig, there you go, you're good to go, and you can just jump in and start driving with a different rim in your different cars. And I have to say, it actually makes a large difference in terms of the immersion if you're driving a Formula car in a game to use a Formula rim, and if you're driving a sort of normal road car with a road steering wheel to use a full rim if you're doing drifting or what have you. It makes a big difference to the immersion, surprisingly so. Last comment on the build quality again. My experience, I've had a chance to use a lot of rims. I've had the G25, I've used the Fanatec rims, the BMW rim, the Fanatec Formula 1 rim. I've used mod rims, I've used Momo wheels, and then of course a couple of real car wheels. And as I said, I think the thing with the Thrustmaster wheels is the build quality is nowhere near as high as what you get with the Fanatec wheels or real car wheels, but they function and they work, and they are cheaper. So you get the functionality, but there's definitely an aspect of them that can feel a little bit cheap, and you know, they don't have LED lights on them for rev counters and things, so you get what you pay for, put it that way. But it is nice that you, at least with this wheel, do have the Thrustmaster ecosystem with all their different rims they do. It'll be really interesting. I haven't tried it yet, but it'll be really interesting to try the Alcantara rim. I think it's an Alcantara GTE rim. It might be suede again, but they've got a proper GTE rim with a sort of D-shaped rim. It'll be really interesting to see what that's like and the quality of that is. But I don't have one of them to review at this point in time, so we won't know. There we go. Removing that, probably destroying it in the process. Before I stick this rim back on, the actual quick release mechanism and the way it attaches on, it uses it's like an ABS plastic, and strangely, to attach the rim, you have to screw this part left rather than right. Instead of righty-tighty, it's lefty-tighty, righty-loosey, which is a little bit confusing. And then the screw that you use to fasten it in place is rather strange. It's just a generic screw, so somewhat bizarre, but there you go. And we're good. Moving on to the meat and potatoes, the force feedback. Now, my first wheel was the Momo Black, or the first wheel that I owned properly was the Momo Black. Then I had the G25. Following on from the G25, I had the T500 for a bit. Then I went back to the G25. Then I got this T300, which I've been using for the last year or so. And aside from that, I've also used a OSW for about 15 hours and the AccuForce wheel for about 15 hours. And I've also had a bit of time with some of the other consumer wheels on the market, but not properly. And I've used some other direct drive wheels that you find in those sort of simulators that you rent access to. In terms of where this TSPC RACER wheel places, I think it's essentially, and the easiest way to describe it is it comes across as a T300 but with a more powerful motor. From that you get more torque, slightly faster rotation, and you also get more track detail as well, and you also get more detail when the wheel is under load. So for example, if you're driving down the hill in a Formula car at Spa, if you're under near full load on the motor and then you hit a bit of curbing, you just get that small texture on top of the actual continued force. So it really is a sort of more beastie T300. From what I understand, most of the mechanism inside is similar to the T300. The main thing they've upgraded is the motor and then having more power to the motor. So that's really why that would make sense, and it definitely comes across that way. I would say if the if the T300 was 100%, the TS-PC RACER is 150%. It's got 50% more clarity, 50% more strength over the T300, and the actual general mechanism and feel of it is very similar to the T300, only with more strength and slightly more detail. Now, in terms of the standing resistance on the motor itself, there's a little bit more mechanical resistance to the mechanism, and I guess that comes from the motor being larger, and there's a tiny bit more cogging on the TS-PC RACER than the T300, and again I think that's just probably because it's got a larger motor in it. But when you're actually driving and racing, you really aren't aware of that cogging at all. You can't feel it. And obviously, if you compare it to something like the cogging that you feel in the G25 or the ratchety feel in the G25, this is on another level smoother and very much like the T300. When you're actually driving with the wheel, you don't notice that at all. But when it's turned off, you can sort of feel the motor texture there. There's no dead zone to the force feedback that I'm aware of. The only thing you do notice is that with this being a belt-driven wheel, and you find this, I think this is the case with every single consumer belt-driven wheel, every single one I've used, you do have a sort of almost sponginess to the force feedback. It's not got that immediacy or that direct absolute pinpoint sharp response that you get from direct drive wheels like the OSW and the AccuForce wheel. But of course, you know, an AccuForce wheel is £1,500 and an OSW with your own custom rim will set you back about £1,200. So really, it's just a stronger T300 is my perception of it. With the extra strength though that you get from this base, I definitely find it adds a lot to the immersion and the believability of cars in the driving simulators. It's got to that level of force feedback strength where actually for slower cars or road cars that you tend to find in some driving simulators, you'll be turning the force feedback down because the force feedback's stronger than what you would really get from those cars in reality. You also find that it's at a strength where you're not really fighting the force feedback. It's not quite strong enough that it's wrenching your arms off, but you get that effect that you get from the more powerful wheels, where when you're going around the corner and you're turning and the track is sort of nudging the wheel a little bit and you're not really fighting against the wheel. The car's sort of still driving itself and staying stable, but you're feeling that sort of fight of the vehicle to some extent, which to me adds a lot of immersion to the game. It's something that you find if you ever get the chance to use a direct drive wheel like an OSW or an AccuForce wheel, those capture it perfectly, and you need really high end motors, or sort of 25 Newton meters plus to really get it. But this sort of gets you a tiny smidgen of that aspect of the car riding over the bumps and shaking the wheel, and you sort of going with that. This wheel, out of all the Thrustmaster wheels, is the first wheel that's really done that for me, and does it in a sort of concise way. The T500 did it a little bit, but the T500 was just so... The actual motor in the T500 is a bit sluggish and it's just ill-defined, whereas this manages to stay really nice and precise whilst giving you those little satisfying jolts and bumps when the car's under load. Another aspect of having this stronger force feedback is that you have more of a force to sort of drive against, that pushes against you when you go into corners, and I definitely found it easier to reliably and repeatedly position the car into corners and replicate that, because the strength of the wheel is such that it's a lot harder to accidentally overcompensate and overturn into corners. Not only is it stronger to push against, so you're sort of using more of a muscle memory action rather than a definitive rotation of the wheel, as you'll find with much weaker wheels like the G25 and the T300 to some extent, but it's also that you've got more information now, more of a range of information from the force feedback with the available strength that's there to like inform you as to how much you're pushing the tyres towards and then over the limit. The easiest way to sort of describe it is, if you had a sound system, if you have louder speakers, it means that you can have there's a larger range between the quieter sounds and the louder sounds, and so there's more difference there for you to then listen to. And force feedback is a bit like that as well. The stronger the force feedback, or the larger the range of the force feedback has, the more information that you then get as a driver to then respond to from the game. So it just makes it a lot easier to be precise and a lot easier to understand what's going on in the game, even compared to the T300 and certainly compared to my previous G25 and some of the other less powerful wheels on the market. Of course though, if you're just about raw lap times and just about the jumping into a game and driving, just about any wheel will do. If a wheel's loose, you don't even need force feedback to be fast. But it's a mixture of making it easier for yourself and immersion, and the stronger force feedback that this wheel gives you definitely adds to those aspects of the experience and joy of sim racing. Lastly, with the force feedback, in terms of noise, the wheel is pretty quiet. It's not quite as quiet as the T300, tiny bit noisier, but nowhere near as noisy as the G25 or the Logitech G27, and presumably the G29 and the G920, which use a similar mechanism to the G27. Pretty much silent when using it. you know, if anything, when you're getting into heavy corners and you're shuffling around in your rig a bit, you might make more noise with your bottom than the wheel's actually making as you shuffle around in your sim rig. The fan on the wheel, you can hear it turn on, but you know, if you're driving with speakers, you won't notice it. And if you're wearing headphones, you certainly won't notice the fan. It's not that noisy, even when at full load. I have noticed that, like the T300 actually, if you leave your wheel plugged in to the socket and also plugged into USB, there can be a very faint, high-pitched whine. I'm sure some people won't hear it, but it's the kind of thing that I can hear. So I have to turn the. I've got a USB hub here where I can just turn the USB devices off. So you have to unplug it from the USB. You can leave the power on, but you can unplug the USB, and that turns that whine off. So I'm not sure what's causing that. So on the grand scheme of things, when it comes to noise, it's not really in consideration. You're going to be making more noise with your feet. Just your general driving than what the wheel itself actually produces. So that pretty much concludes our sort of somewhat in-depth first impressions review of the TS-PC Racer force feedback wheel. Really, what I would say, my recommendation for this wheel is, at the moment, for the £500 they sell it at, or the $460 if you take advantage of the Christmas discount, I think it's a little bit overpriced for what you get relative to the fantastically priced T300, especially if you consider that with this rim you don't get any pedals, a shift or anything else. You're literally getting a rim and a wheelbase. In my opinion, once this wheel gets down to under £400, then it will be worth getting, especially as an upgrade from the T300, or if you just wanted a sort of more high quality or a force feedback wheel that starts to get more serious in its amount of torque and more serious in its rotational speeds, and gets you feeling much more as if you're driving an actual car rather than playing a game with more abstract steering. Following on from this video, we're going to do some torque and drives with this steering wheel in some of the other simulators out there. What I'll also do is, if you drop questions in the comments, I'll try and answer them in the future videos. And what I would say is that Inside Sim Racing are doing a review of this wheel as well, so I would check theirs out, because they will go over some of the other aspects of it, like the way you can attach it to your desk with the clamp, and I'm sure they'll also cover setting up the wheel, which is something I've not done in this video, because quite frankly I'm more interested in what it's like to use and stuff like the general build quality. So check out Inside Sim Racing, link in the description below this video. If you've got any questions about the wheel, or you just hate me, which is perfectly fine, put them in the comments and I'll try and answer them in future videos. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and like this video. Until the next video, which won't be very long, thanks for watching and goodbye.